Welcome to my latest video where we explore an exciting what-if scenario in the world of Naruto. What if Nagato gave his Rinnegan to Naruto? Imagine Naruto with the ultimate power of the Rinnegan, a power that only a few have ever possessed. How would this change the course of the Naruto storyline? Let's dive in and find out. Naruto watched cautiously as Nagato trembled with sweat on his brow, eyes shut tight, head bowed, and hands held in the serpent seal. His hair had changed from a deep dark red to white, and he looked as though he was on death's door, more so than he was before. Naruto hadn't seen anyone in this bad of shape since he dragged Sasuke back from the Valley of the End, and he and Sasuke had both taken a pretty thorough beating from one another. Nagato's blue-haired companion, Konan, only looked on, an expression of worry painted on her normally stoic face. Naruto knew he had just performed a taxing jutsu, but he wasn't sure what it did, or why the woman seemed to be concerned. What just happened? What was that jutsu? He asked. The woman spoke, her voice calm despite her concerned expression. Rin Tensei no jutsu. The blonde looked at her with a confused expression. Nagato's ocular power is one that can govern life and death, she continued. Naruto's eyes whitened as he began to understand. You don't mean he trailed off. Konan averted her gaze to the ground. The villagers that were killed will be revived, one after another, she spoke placidly, though her face and eyes betrayed a sense of sorrow. Nagato held the hand seal as he raised his head and opened his eyes slowly. Naruto watched as those purple ringed eyes focused intensely on him. Nagato spoke in a tired voice, I'm still in time to revive those I've killed since arriving in Konoha. It's the least I can do for them. Naruto only stared at Nagato incredulously. The man who sat in a machine that let him control the 6 bodies he had defeated earlier, the very same man who was responsible for so much death and the destruction of his home, was now saving everyone whose lives he had cut short. Though Naruto's blood was boiling, he felt relieved that those same people would be back. He couldn't help but feel a small amount of gratitude, but he didn't show it. Nagato released the hand seal. His breathing was labored, but he somehow mustered the strength to speak. War inflicts death, injury, and pain to both sides. The death of someone dear is hard to accept. We convince ourselves that there's no way they could die, he said with tired determination as he slowly lowered his arms, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth onto the machine. Konan glanced quickly at her companion before resting her gaze on the blonde Konoha ninja in front of them. She remained worried, but her expression relaxed slightly as she acknowledged the truth in Nagato's words. It especially can't be helped with your generation, you don't know war. You may try to find meaning in death, but there is only pain. Nagato raised his eyes to look at Naruto as he continued. An unbearable hatred, senseless deaths, eternal hatred, and a pain that does not heal. That is what war is, he said as Naruto watched him, listening intently, his expression unwavering. Naruto, this is what you will be facing in time, the skeletal man stated. Naruto's eyes whitened. What does he mean by that? Does he somehow know what's going to happen in the future? That would be hard to believe, but after everything that's happened here today, I really wouldn't put it past him, he mused to himself. Nagato took a deep breath before he closed his eyes and chuckled softly. You in that book, it feels like someone set it all up. Or, perhaps, it was the work of a real god. Naruto only stood there, watching Nagato carefully, still not showing any emotion. It seems my work ends here, Naruto, Nagato said wearily, as his eyes opened once again. I believe you can bring true peace in my stead. Naruto's eyes widened as he took a small but sharp intake of breath. He noticed Nagato's eyes change ever so slightly, softening almost imperceptibly, but the blonde knew that Nagato's last statement carried more weight than he let on. Those were his last thoughts before he felt his eyes grow immeasurably heavy, his knees turned to jelly and gave way beneath him. The world spun as he suddenly felt himself in a state of freefall. It was slow, agonizing, he had lost control of his body. Care of him, Konan, he thought he heard Nagato say. His vision darkened and he felt nothing as he hit the ground with a thud. He hadn't noticed the one-handed seal that Konan made, and he didn't feel the wave of chakra that knocked him out cold. She walked over to the Konoha ninja, looking over her shoulder at Nagato. This time, there was apprehension in her voice. Are you sure about this, Nagato? Do you really trust him that much? Especially with she trailed off. I truly hope this boy is who Nagato thinks he is. If he isn't, then this will all be for naught, she thought to herself. Nagato gave a weak nod before speaking. I do, Konan. He and I are not so different. He reminds me of myself, and a bit of Yahiko. His voice trailed as he said the last part, but Konan heard him, and blinked back a few tears at the mention of their friend. He was right. He was a bit like Yahiko, determined to bring peace to this cruel shinobi world. She only nodded before kneeling and carefully laying Naruto on his back, quietly remembering Yahiko and who he was. Are you ready, Konan? Nagato asked his blue-haired friend. He looked at her, remembering everything they had been through together. He remembered their time in Ain, their time with Jiraiya, their time with Yahiko. He smiled inwardly. He felt an immeasurable gratitude to his 2 friends. They were more like siblings to him than friends. Konan turned to him, her amber eyes soft but determined, and gave him a nod. She knew what she had to do. Nagato nodded back. Take my eyes. Give them to him. He'll do what I couldn't do. What we couldn't do, he trailed off. His voice held undertones of acceptance and disappointment in what the Akatsuki had become. Conan rose and started towards Nagato, and he spoke with his last breaths as she did. Thank you, Conan, thank you for the bread, thank you for being my family, he said with a weak voice as his eyes shut for the last time. Conan looked upon the man she came to see as a brother, blinking back long withheld tears. No, Nagato, thank you, she shakily whispered as she took him and laid him down next to Naruto. Conan took a deep breath to relax herself. She wasn't a medic nin by any means, but she had knowledge of first aid and treating wounds of different sizes from her time traveling with Yahiko and Nagato. She had minimal knowledge of medical ninjutsu, and only learned the basics of mystical palm, thanks to Jiraiya telling the trio about his teammate, Tsunade. This, however, was something she had no knowledge of, outside of basic anatomy. Her first thought was to reach for her kunai, but thought better of using something so large and unwieldy for something so delicate. She then had the idea of using her paper to make a scalpel. She knew she could make her paper razor sharp, and she had much better control of her paper than she would a kunai. She breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that she had surmounted that obstacle. She knelt and gently opened Naruto's eyelid, afraid to wake him, despite knowing he would be out cold for a long while. Her hands were shaking. She tried to steady her breathing. I can do this. I have to do this. For Nagato. For Yahiko. For the world, she told herself. She focused as she gingerly worked her floating paper scalpel into Naruto's first eye socket, severing its connections, and carefully removing it with her still shaky hand. She quickly moved to his other eye, repeating the procedure, her hands only slightly less shaky. Holding the eyes of this boy, seeing their bright sapphire bluer eyes outside of his head, feeling their weight in her hand, it was one of the strangest things she'd ever experienced. She shook her head, pushing that thought aside, as she went to Nagato and carefully removed his eyes, making sure to keep them as intact as possible. For a moment she marveled at them. She never realized what the Rinnegan did to a person's eyes, how it completely changed the eye from white to purple, how the concentric circles were somehow embedded into the sclera, unable to be removed. She breathed a sigh of relief, only to notice her hands were covered in blood. She stared at her hands in utter shock, one holding Naruto's eyes, the other holding Nagato's. Don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, damn it, she thought, as she took a deep quivering breath to calm down. She was no stranger to violence, no stranger to blood or death, but something about this made her skin crawl. She pushed those feelings aside as she got to work, gently opening each of Naruto's eyelids once again, carefully sliding Nagato's purple orbs into place. She drew upon her knowledge of mystical palm and focused, trying to stop the bleeding as best she could, and to repair the muscles and optic nerves. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she focused on pushing the healing chakra into Naruto. I pray this holds together long enough for him to get proper treatment, otherwise this will have been for nothing, she thought to herself. She felt the connections repair themselves to a point where they were salvageable, and she tried to stop the bleeding enough so he wouldn't lose too much blood. Despite her efforts, he still looked like hell. Blood had run out of his eye sockets and onto his temples. Conan cursed her lack of proficiency, but she knew he would be in good hands. One of his teammates was an apprentice of Tsunade, or so she heard. She set him against a tree close by before going, wincing at the fresh blood leaking from his closed eyes. It ran down his whisker-marked cheeks like tears. She looked over him one last time before going to reclaim the bodies of Nagato and Yahiko. She wrapped their bodies in her paper before she dispersed a paper tree that she and Nagato had been hiding in. She summoned her paper wings and journeyed back to Omagakure with the bodies of her friends. Only after she buried them both did she sit down and allow the dam holding her emotions back to break. She cried until she had no more tears, letting herself mourn the death of her brother. At least the rain would mask the sound of her sobs. Kakashi found him against a tree. Not that it was particularly difficult, as his orange tracksuit and blonde hair were like a beacon for anyone trying to find him. He breathed a sigh of relief that he had found his student, but his relief turned to shock and concern as he approached Naruto and noticed all the blood on his face. Naruto. He called out to his student, no response. Kakashi cursed under his breath, expecting the worst, but was hoping it wasn't so. He landed in front of Naruto, looking over his student with an expression of worry in his one visible eye. Naruto was motionless, and it looked as though he wasn't breathing. Kakashi gently shook the boy by his shoulder, which caused him to grunt. Kakashi let out the breath he had been holding. Thank goodness he's alive, he thought to himself, relieved beyond measure. He ventured to examine the apparent wounds to his eyes, gently opening his eyelid to inspect the damage. As soon as he saw Naruto's eye, Kakashi gasped. This can't be, he said under his breath. He immediately lifted his headband and opened his Sharingan eye to examine what appeared to be a Rinnegan eye. He channeled chakra into it and gasped again. He has it, he has the Eye of Legend, he said. He could hardly believe it. He opened Naruto's other eyelid and was stunned to see that he had not one, but two Rinnegan. Kakashi hoisted his student onto his back, quickly setting off to head back towards Konoha, or what was left of it. He knew he had to get Naruto to Sakura and Shizune. Naruto, just what happened back there? Kakashi asked, knowing he wouldn't get a response anytime soon. Sakura walked through the ruins of the village, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She saw the bodies, she saw the destruction caused by that orange-haired Akatsuki member. She heard the screams, the explosions, the groaning of buildings collapsing. She smelled the dust from said buildings, she smelled the smoke and ash from the fires, she smelled the blood from the dead and injured. Those sights, sounds, and smells were burned into her mind. She remembered when Naruto finally arrived and fought pain. She saw him stab Naruto, pinning him to the ground. She watched in horror as he threw Hinata around like a ragdoll, before he drove one of his rods through her. That was when she felt the air explode with a familiar chakra. After the explosion of chakra from the nine-tailed fox that nearly knocked her off her feet, the two fought furiously, and she remembered Naruto tearing after pain into the forest. She immediately set off to look for survivors after Sasuke snapped her out of her trance. While the village was still destroyed, the very same people she had seen perish were back, somehow just as alive as they were before the attack. She could hardly believe it. She even ran into Kakashi, who she embraced, glad to see a familiar face. "Kakashi-sensei, where's Naruto? I haven't seen him since she asked as her voice trailed off. Kakashi's visible brow raised. "Since what, Sakura?" he asked to Kunoichi, with a hint of concern in his voice. Since he went berserk and released that chakra again," she said, biting her lip and averting her eyes. Kakashi's eye widened at the mention of the Nine Tails chakra. "The Nine Tails? That can't have been good. I'll need to follow up with Yamato," he noted as he continued to listen to his student. Sakura took a breath and regained her composure. "He fought pain in that state for a bit before they both went into the forest," she stated, finally meeting her sensei's inquisitive gaze. Kakashi nodded, a determined look in his eye. "Thank you, Sakura. I'll go look for him, since he could be hurt. It would probably be best for you to find Shizune if she's around and tend to the wounded. I'll come find you and Sasuke once I've found Naruto," he said before sprinting off towards the forest. Sakura sighed to herself and wrung her hands. "Naruto, please be okay, Kakashi-sensei. Please find him," she prayed. Sasuke was looking for survivors, while she was heading to the field hospital that had been set up to tend to the wounded. Sasuke had promised her he would meet her at the field hospital after he had finished his search. She walked at a steady pace, her emerald eyes never left the ground as worry gripped her heart like a vise. Sasuke had been looking for survivors and pulling bodies from the rubble when it happened. He felt something strange. The next thing he knew, the same body he had just pulled from the rubble glowed green stood up on its own. Instinctively, he activated his Sharingan to see if it was a genjutsu, but much to his shock, it wasn't. The same person who was dead not even 5 minutes ago was alive and walking as though nothing had happened. He blinked a few times, mouth agape, before shaking his head to snap himself out of it. Looking around, he could see more people rising where green glows appeared. What in the world is all this? People are just coming back to life. Is this some sort of jutsu? Sasuke asked himself, trying to reason his way through the events unfolding before him. His mind immediately went to his teammate and best friend. "Naruto, what happened? What did you do?" he asked aloud, watching people once to cease walking once more, his expression stoic despite his surprise and disbelief at the situation. "He'd better come back safe, you idiot," he thought to himself. He was worried about the blonde fool, but he would never admit it to anyone, not even himself. He made his way to the field hospital to find Sakura. The field hospital was organized chaos. Medics scurried about, tending to the wounded, while shinobi and civilians alike were bringing in survivors, some of whom were worse for wear than others. Sasuke arrived in the wake of the mass resurrection, which, if anything, threw the field hospital into more chaos. Patients pronounced dead were now suddenly up and walking, as though they had only woken from a nap. The incredulity and shock had given way to relief and cautious joy. Sasuke took in the sights and sounds as he walked along the gravel path separating two rows of tents. The air was heavy with the smell of antiseptic, canvas, and iron. His eyes wandered, stealing glances into open tents, hoping to find his pink-haired teammate. Though he wasn't thinking it, he was hoping to find Naruto with Sakura. The blonde would no doubt be getting an earful from his pink-haired friend, as well as a good smack upside the head for worrying his team, especially her. Sasuke had found Sakura's temper annoying at first, especially when he was put on a team with her and Naruto. As time passed, however, he found her peculiar way of showing affection a bit endearing. Thankfully, she had reeled her temper in a bit, especially after the Chunin exams. His reminiscing was cut short when he spotted pink locks a short distance away. He quickened his pace, gravel crunching beneath his sandals. "Sakura, over here," he called to his teammate. Her head snapped up from what she was doing, her emerald eyes searching for her teammate. She spotted his spiky black hair and breathed a sigh of relief as she caught him in a crushing embrace, which Sasuke returned. "You made it back," she sighed, burying her face in his shoulder. The two held each other for a second, taking in each other's presence, and the fact that they were both okay before Sakura released Sasuke and took a step back. "Have you seen what happened? People who were dead are somehow alive again, as if nothing happened," she asked, with a puzzled look. Sasuke nodded, a similar look disfiguring his normally stoic face. "Yeah, I have. Matter of fact, I saw someone I pulled from the rubble glow green and get right back up. I thought it was a genjutsu at first, but this is all actually happening. Could this have something to do with what happened with, he started, before Sakura finished his question for him. Naruto. I don't know, she said, brows furrowed, eyes focused on the ground as she once again went over what had happened, trying to make a connection between that and the resurrections. I mean, you saw what happened. He did release that chakra again. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this, but then again she trailed off. With how little we know of that chakra and what it's really capable of, it's hard to say for sure, she thought. Sasuke sighed, knowing what the girl was thinking. Since neither of them had seen anything aside from glowing bodies standing up again, it was hard to say for certain whether or not Naruto was the reason those people were alive again. Knowing him, he probably did have something to do with this. He's always had a knack for pulling things off at the last second, and unexpectedly so the Uchiha mused. I suppose the only one who can say for sure is Naruto. Speaking of which, have you seen him since the battle? Do you know if he found his way back yet? He asked his teammate. Sakura shook her head. No, she stated, her voice thick with disappointment. I ran into Kakashi-sensei on the way here. He said he was going to look for Naruto after I told him which direction he and Pain headed off in. After that, I ran into you, and now here we are. She took a moment to look over Sasuke. You look exhausted, Sasuke. You should go rest, she said with a small smile. Chen. Sasuke gave his teammate a knowing look. You know I won't sit down until that idiot shows up with Kakashi, he said nonchalantly. Besides, I need to give him a piece of my mind for keeping all the fun to himself. Sakura rolled her eyes and couldn't help but giggle. The rivalry between those two never ceased to amaze and amuse her in equal parts. It had brought them closer since they were in the academy. She knew Sasuke and Naruto had been friends even before she met them in the academy, but seeing their friendship firsthand, and how the two respected each other warmed her heart. The two were like brothers to each other. That fact was especially evident after Naruto had beaten some sense into Sasuke when he became consumed with his thirst for revenge against his brother, Itachi. He had wanted to leave everything behind for the sake of getting stronger, but Naruto had reminded him of the strength they shared whenever they fought together as a team, and had opened Sasuke's eyes to the path he was dangerously close to following. Her own reminiscing was cut short when she noticed Sasuke's eyes whiten like dinner plates. Sakura. Look, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her head snapped around, and she saw the familiar silver spikes of her sensei's hair. She breathed a sigh of relief before she gasped, her own eyes whitening at the sight of her orange-clad teammate on Kakashi's back. Tears stung her eyes as she noticed there was blood on his face. Her heart shot into her throat, her trembling hands moved up to her face. Oh no, she shakily said, her voice barely above a whisper. No way, there's no way he's this badly hurt. This can't be happening. She momentarily argued with herself about what she was seeing, but she snapped herself out of it after seeing Sasuke jog towards Kakashi. She immediately flipped her medic switch and ran towards her team. How bad is it? Has the bleeding stopped? She asked Kakashi, her voice calm but with an edge of determination. She immediately started leading him to find an open tent. I'm not sure just how bad, but the bleeding has slowed. He's unconscious, but he seems stable for now, he replied urgently. Sakura nodded and breathed a small sigh of relief, mentally noting how the blood had fallen on his cheeks and his temples. Someone did this to him while lying down. Did Pain do this? Why go for his eyes specifically? She wondered. She turned to Sasuke, his face was stoic, but his eyes showed genuine concern for his friend. Sasuke, go find Shizune and bring her here. Tell her it's an emergency with Naruto. Sensei, let's get him inside, she calmly ordered. Both gave a curt nod, and Sasuke set off to find Tsunade's assistant, while Kakashi followed Sakura. Sakura ushered Kakashi into the tent, following after him and immediately going into medic mode. Kakashi laid Naruto down on the futon on the ground before Sakura came and held her teammate's wrist, checking his pulse. It's a little slow, but it's stable, she noted, before unzipping his jacket and placing a hand on his mesh-clad chest, channeling a small amount of chakra into her hand and feeling for his breathing. Labored. Whatever happened after the fight must have taken a lot out of him. She prepared an IV drip and inserted the needle into his arm, adjusting his head with a small pillow to keep him comfortable. She turned her focus to his eyes. The bleeding had slowed down considerably, going from a steady drip to a small leak down his temples. She channeled healing chakra to her hands, and gently placed her palms over Naruto's eyes, simultaneously healing and sensing for the damage done to his eyes. This is strange, there's damage to the optic nerve and the muscles around the eye, but it's been repaired slightly. It's almost like someone performed a field surgery, then partially healed him with medical ninjutsu. It's not on the same level as a medic, but whoever healed him seems to have done enough to save his optic nerves and his muscles, she noted. She breathed a sigh of relief, knowing her friend would be able to see after being looked at by herself and Shizune. She turned to Kakashi's waiting gaze after finishing her examination. How is he? Is it as bad as it looks? The masked man asked. Sakura shook her head. He'll be alright. He should have no problem seeing and looking around after Shizune, and I'd take a closer look and heal him further. There's just one thing that's strange about what I found. Kakashi raised his brow. Sakura turned to look at her unconscious teammate before continuing. The damage that was done seems to have been healed before you brought him here. Not only that, but it seems like the damage done to his optic nerves and muscles was the result of a field surgery of some kind. Kakashi's eye widened at that. You mean this was intentional? He asked his pink-haired student. She gave him a small nod. Kakashi looked at his blonde student, wondering just what had transpired since Naruto's fight. Sakura ventured to carefully peel one of his eyelids open with a trembling hand. Just as her fingers touched his skin, Kakashi's hand gently grabbed her wrist, causing her to freeze and snap her head to her sensei. Her emerald eyes held confusion and concern. Sensei. What is it? She noticed he had a far-off look in his visible eye, which worried her even more. He spoke quietly and evenly, warning her, Sakura, before you open his eyes to look at them, you need to know something important. Her eyes widened and she gave a small nod before he continued, his voice even lower than before. His eyes are not normal, he stated, the last word wrought with tension from the implications. Sakura blinked at him before she gulped and gave a small nod, prompting him to release her hand. She took a quivering breath to calm down before she gingerly peeled Naruto's eye open. She gasped. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. In place of the familiar sapphire blue, there was purple. In fact, his entire eye was a light purple, within black concentric circles emanating from a small, narrow pupil. His irises were only a slightly darker shade than the rest of his eye. She quickly but carefully opened his other eye. An equally astonished gasp escaped her lips as she saw the same ringed purple orb offering its empty gaze. Sakura looked to her sensei, trying to understand what Naruto's eyes were and what they meant. Kakashi-sensei, what happened to his eyes? She asked, her voice thick with concern. He only shook his head and sighed. I'm not sure, if I'm being honest, he said dejectedly. He looked at the concerned girl with a soft eye. I know those eyes. I've heard of them and even seen them before. I checked them with my Sharingan to make sure someone hadn't put a genjutsu or transformation on him, but those eyes are as real as you and me. Sakura wrung her hands, her gaze not leaving the silver-haired Chunin. What are they? I've never seen eyes like that before. They don't look like Sasuke's eyes or any of the Hyuga's eyes, so it can't be Sharingan or Byakugan. She trailed off, trying to reason her way through what Naruto's eyes could be. Kakashi knelt in front of her, meeting her gaze. You're right, they're not Sharingan or Byakugan. In fact, those eyes that Naruto's got, he pointed his thumb at the blonde, are said to be more powerful than both the Sharingan and the Byakugan. They're called the Rinnegan. The only other person who was said to possess them was called the Sage of Six Paths. Sakura gasped again, her eyes were the size of dinner plates by this point. Her voice was low but was dripping with shock and disbelief. The Sage of Six Paths. But he's just a myth. There's no way he could have the same eyes as, well, a minor god. She glanced at her unconscious teammate, trying and failing to understand how this could be possible. Her train of thought was interrupted by her sensei. That's what I thought too. However, that jutsu is unmistakable, he stated with a sense of finality. Sakura once again looked at the unconscious Naruto. This just sounds so unbelievable, she thought aloud. But I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. You've always been full of surprises, she said to her unconscious teammate. A small smile tugged at her and Kakashi's mouths. They sat in silence for a moment. Sasuke entered the tent and snapped them back to the matter at hand. I found Shizune, he announced as he ushered Tsunade's dark-haired assistant in. Sakura quickly got up and thanked Sasuke before filling Shizune in on the situation and Naruto's current condition. I checked his vitals, he's stable for now. Breathing is a bit labored, likely from fatigue and the force of whatever knocked him unconscious. The bleeding has slowed considerably. She paused before looking at Shizune with a pleading gaze. Shizune, I need you to promise me something. She turned to Sasuke. You, too, Sasuke. They both gave Sakura puzzled looks before nodding. Sakura gestured to both of them as the trio knelt down next to Naruto. Sakura looked at both of her raven-haired companions before speaking in a quiet but serious voice. What you're about to see stays between us and Lady Tsunade. Nobody else is to know about this, clear. Sasuke's face hardened as he grasped the severity of what she was about to show them, while Shizune still wore a confused expression. After looking into Sakura's pleading gaze, she nodded. Sakura took a deep breath before she gently opened one of Naruto's eyelids, revealing one of his Rinnegan. Shizune gasped and brought her hands to her mouth, lost for words. Sasuke's eyes widened as he instinctively activated his Sharingan, which Kakashi took notice of. It's not a transformation or genjutsu. I checked when I found him. Those eyes are real, he explained to the Uchiha. Sasuke stared at the purple orb before his eyes changed back to their normal onyx color. Sakura's emerald eyes jumped between Shizune and her raven-haired teammate. Both of his eyes are like this, she stated as she gently peeled open his other eye, revealing the same purple orb with concentric circles. She let his eye close. Shizune's eyes were impossibly white and unblinking, her gaze fixated on Naruto's face. Sasuke was stiff as a board, his eyes no less unblinking, also staring at his teammate. They all sat in silence, the air thick with uncertainty and shock. Sasuke was the first to break the silence. Kakashi-sensei, those eyes, are they ninjutsu? They sure as hell aren't Sharingan or Byakugan, he asked, not looking away from Naruto. Kakashi nodded. They are. Naruto seems to have acquired the Rinnegan, he said plainly. Both Sasuke's and Shizune's had snapped to look at the silver-haired man. They were met with his usual half-lidded, indifferent gaze. This time Shizune spoke, her voice trembling slightly. The same eyes as the Sage of Six Paths, but how? She thought aloud. There's something else that I should mention, Sakura began as Sasuke and Shizune turned to face her. When I was examining him, I found that the damage done to his optic nerves and the muscles in his eye sockets was repaired before he got here. Not only that, but the damage that was still present was too precise to be anything inflicted by something like a kunai or, heaven forbid, someone ripping his eyes out with their bare hands. It was like someone surgically removed his original eyes and replaced them with the Rinnegan, she explained. Shizune gasped again. Sasuke's jaw dropped. Shizune reached for Naruto's face, channeling chakra into her hands, and gently placing her palms over his closed eyes, looking for the signs Sakura had described. After a few moments, she sighed. Sakura is right, the optic nerves and surrounding ocular muscles seem to have been deliberately cut and repaired, albeit by someone who isn't a medic, judging by the extent of the repairs. She explained, before turning to Sakura. You know his blood type. The younger medic gave a curt nod and stood up, already knowing what her colleague was going to ask. I'll go try to find a transfusion kit just in case, she said, exiting the tent. The crunch of gravel beneath her sandals quieted as she walked away. Shizune turned back to the blonde and molded her chakra to start healing his eyes and their connections. Despite the non-professional healing that was done, she was glad that someone at least had the sense to do so, since this made her job that much easier, and likely saved Naruto's sense of sight. Kakashi turned to Sasuke, who hadn't moved much since the two medics had gotten to work, seemingly in a trance. The Jinin rose, and placed a hand on his student's shoulder, causing him to flinch at the unexpected contact. Sasuke turned to look up at Kakashi's half-lidded eye. Come on, let's give Shizune some space while she fixes up Naruto, Kakashi said calmly, trying to relax the Uchiha. Tell Sakura we'll be outside resting, we won't be far away, he said to Shizune. She nodded over her shoulder with a small smile aimed at Sasuke, as she continued to work on Naruto. Sasuke sighed. He didn't want to leave his teammate and friend alone, but he knew that he would want him to be rested as well. Sasuke turned once more to his unconscious friend. You better wake up soon, dummy. I need to test that ninjutsu of yours, he muttered. I'll help you when you wake up. You're my brother. It's the least I can do for you after what you've done for me, he thought to himself. Kakashi gave one of his signature smiles as he ushered himself and Sasuke out of the tent. It was late afternoon, and the sun had crept further into the west. Ghosts of orange and pink peeked out from the horizon, signaling the impending sunset. Thin wisps of clouds adorned the sky like brushstrokes of white on a light blue canvas. The beauty and serenity of the heavens stood in stark contrast to the tragedy that occurred below. Sasuke and Kakashi walked in silence for a bit, looking for somewhere to sit and rest. They happened upon a few logs arranged in a circle, likely used by other weary survivors to rest. The duo sat across from each other, each letting out an exhausted sigh. Kakashi's visible eye closed as he gathered his thoughts and meditated, while Sasuke studied the gravel and dirt beneath his feet. Sasuke broke the silence, retrieving his canteen. So, Kakashi-sensei, he started. The masked Nin let out a hum and slowly opened his eye to meet his student's onyx gaze. What happened with you before you found Naruto? Neither me nor Sakura saw you when he was fighting pain, he continued, opening his canteen to take a drink. Kakashi tilted his head slightly at his student before he gave another of his distinctive smiles. Ah, well. You see, I was incapacitated after fighting a couple of Pain's bodies, he said nonchalantly. Sasuke immediately choked on his water, spitting out the sip he had taken and coughing violently. Kakashi maintained his jovial expression. Sasuke turned to his sensei with a furrowed brow after he cleared his throat. What do you mean incapacitated? He probed, knowing there was more behind that word than simply being unconscious, given Kakashi's way of understating even serious matters. The silver-haired scarecrow merely rubbed the back of his head, his expression shifting slightly to reflect his sheepishness. Well, I was stuck in a pile of rubble for a while. Thankfully Chimjai and Chimzal were there to help me, but pain did quite a number on us. Even Choza was down, he explained. Sasuke's brow returned to normal as he gave a small nod. I was the one who sent Choji to warn Lady Tsunade about Pain's abilities. Actually, Kakashi continued, his eye going back to his familiar half-lidded state. Sasuke nodded once more as Kakashi told more of his side of things. After that, I have no real recollection of anything. The only thing I remember after sending Chimjai was waking up feeling better, and seeing green glows all around me, Chimza being one of them. I ran into Sakura after that, who told me about Naruto's fight. I found him in the forest, and the rest you already know since you were there, he finished with a smile beneath his mask. Sasuke was able to take a drink from his canteen, at last. He sat in silence for a moment, taking in everything his sensei had just told him. He remembered walking with Sakura before the first attack started, helping the civilians to safety, fighting off strange summons, helping Anbu. It was chaos like he had never seen before. Just as he had found Sakura again, he saw the bright flash just before the village was reduced to rubble and a crater. He let out a sigh, trying not to let his mind linger too long on the memories of his home being attacked. Sasuke turned to the Chunin. You know, sensei. I don't think I ever thank you, he stated. Kakashi raised his eyebrow at this. Thank me? For what, Sasuke? He asked, puzzled. Sasuke gave a small smile. For everything, really, he said nonchalantly. Kakashi's eyebrow was fixed in its raised position. Sasuke gave a small chuckle. I guess I should explain, huh? What I mean is for everything you've done as our sensei. For pushing us, teaching us the value of teamwork, not giving up on us, encouraging us. If it weren't for you, Naruto, and Sakura, I don't know if I would be where I am now. I very well could have followed a similar or worse path than Itachi, he continued, a far-off look creeping its way into his eyes as he mentioned his brother, and the path he nearly set off on. After our mission to Wave, I really felt lost. I was frustrated and angry. I had convinced myself that I was angry at my brother, but I was frustrated with myself because I blamed myself for what happened that night to my clan. Even though it took Naruto beating the shit out of me in the Valley of the End for me to come to my senses, I'm grateful to him for it. I never would have remembered that he was one of my first friends, he continued, a smile tugging at his lips as he talked about his teammate who was like a brother to him. Kakashi gave his own smile under his mask. I was worried about you after that mission, you know, he started. You were even moodier than usual and were constantly brooding. You were even bickering with Naruto less. That's what really tipped me off. Even Naruto and Sakura had sought me out at one point to express their concern to me about how you were acting. Especially after the Chunin exams. I had told Naruto the same thing I told you all after the bell test, he recounted. Sasuke nodded, remembering that day. Those that break the rules are scum, but those that abandon their comrades are worse than scum, he said, finishing Kakashi's sentence. Kakashi gave another smile. That's right. It looks like Naruto really took that to heart, didn't he? He asked rhetorically, trying to lighten the mood slightly. Sasuke gave his sensei another smile and a small nod. Just as the two were finishing their reminiscing, they heard a feminine voice from a distance. There you two are. Shizune said you weren't far off, but I didn't think you'd be over here, the familiar voice called. Sasuke and Kakashi turned to see their pink-haired teammate making her way towards them, waving. Kakashi waved back as Sasuke stood. How is he? He asked urgently. Sakura put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He's fine. We hooked him up to a blood transfusion, and Shizune is working on repairing his eyes as we speak. After that he'll just need some rest, she explained. The two men let out sighs of relief. Sakura sat on the log and gave Sasuke an expectant look before he planted himself next to her. She let out her own sigh, turning her attention to Kakashi. So, sensei, what happened with you? I meant to ask you, but then all that stuff happened, she asked. Kakashi gave another distinct smile as he told her about his situation with Shinji, Shimza, and his fight with Pain. Sakura's eyes were glued to the silver-haired man, nodding now and again to convey that she was listening. At the conclusion of his account, she let out another sigh and looked between the two men. I'm just glad you two are okay, and I'm especially glad you found Naruto, sensei, she said as she gave her sensei a small smile. Sasuke hummed and Kakashi returned her smile with a quick nod and his own grin. The trio sat in silence once again. It's easy to mistake this silence as awkwardness or lack of camaraderie. However, it was more of a testament to their deep understanding of each other and their experiences as a team, experiences which forged solid and nigh unshakable bonds. Entire conversations could be held amongst themselves without so much as a sound. And that brings us to the end of our What If story. We hope you enjoyed this thrilling and unique twist on the Naruto universe. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future What If scenarios, please let us know in the comments below. We always love hearing from our viewers. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss out on our latest content. Thank you for watching and for supporting our channel. We'll see you in the next one.